Oh, sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm a public finance economist, which to the layman basically just means that I kind of make up numbers every day. Essentially, what I do is I analyze how the government gets money and how the government spends money, and the various ways in which that affects you and I, basically all the negative ways in which that affects you and I. So chief among the things that I research are the Federal Reserve, since that is a key component of government finance today and is also a key source of taxation via the hidden tax of inflation.
Okay, great. And then you also, though, have written analyses of the labor market, jobs reports, things like that. And that's the specific reason I wanted you on today. So I don't know what the best place to start. You want to just, let me put it this way. A lot of the messaging coming out from the Biden administration is don't listen to Fox News. These people are crazy. Look at how low the unemployment rate is. This is amazing. And certainly if you break it down, even among certain communities, the unemployment rate is at the 40-year low, something like that. And the economy's doing great. Wages are rising faster than inflation, prices and so forth. And so everything's great. And yet I've seen some analysis from you to look at these numbers from a slightly different angle and say, actually, there's storm clouds on the horizon.
Well, that unemployment rate is probably a perfect place to start today. And people need to remember with statistics like the unemployment rate that this thing is a ratio, right? It's not simply as if we just add up all of the people who are unemployed and there's our figure. No, it's an unemployment rate. So it's the unemployed divided by the labor force. But that means that you can change the rate by either changing the number of people who are employed or by adjusting that labor force. And so what we saw during COVID was literally millions of people just leave the workforce. And what's interesting is that almost none of them have returned. Some did, but not that many. So we've seen people enter the labor force for the first time, but a lot of people just simply left and never came back. So that means we're missing millions of people right now from that unemployment rate calculation. So what's interesting is that we have various ways of tracking, all right, how far are we below our growth trend? How far are we below things like our employment trend, et cetera? And the Bureau of Labor Statistics even has a category they keep track of specifically called not in the labor force. So we have a lot of different methodologies we can use to say, all right, if we had the same people who exited the labor force, if we had them in the labor force today, what would that unemployment rate actually look like? Because obviously none of these people have jobs, but they're not counted as unemployed today. So instead of an unemployment rate below 4%, you have an unemployment rate somewhere between 6.5% and 7.7%, again, depending on which methodology you prefer to use. Now, that's not catastrophic, right? This is not Great Depression level unemployment we're talking about here. But 7% unemployment, that's certainly at home in your typical recession. So I think that kind of gives people a better idea of where the labor market is today. And it also lines up a lot closer with poll results when we ask people, how do you feel about the labor market? How do you feel about your own personal situation within the labor market? Those responses tend to be pretty bad. And they tend to be more in line with something you would see, again, in a garden variety recession.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe we'll flash up here on the screen for those who are watching the video, the labor force participation rate. So I'm just looking here at coming from the BLS, and that was trending upward in from the 60s onward, presumably because more women were entering the labor force, and that it peaked at the high, like 67% or so, going into the original dot-com crash. It came down, and then it just fell off a cliff after the financial crisis during the Obama years. And then, as you say, EJ, it fell very sharply during the lockdown, obviously, and then it started coming back up, but it still has not gotten back to the pre-pandemic level. And even that is still way below where it was before the financial crisis. So I suppose, some people would say, oh, well, the population's getting older, and so we shouldn't, there's that element involved. But anyway, do you want to just comment on that?
Oh, certainly. We essentially have a whole host of very bad public policy decisions, which are encouraging people not to work today. And some of that would be things like the expansion of welfare. And I don't just mean the expansion of welfare in terms of the benefits that you receive, but also who is eligible. The reduction of work requirements I think, is a great case study of how a policy that, even if it has the best of intentions, can have absolutely terrible results and can really trap people into these cycles of poverty where if they were to go out and get a job and earn a little bit of money, they would lose more in welfare benefits than they gain in income. And so it doesn't really make sense for a lot of people to ever get off the dole. And unfortunately, we are really seeing that today. But you also have an interesting case where the number of people on disability has absolutely exploded. And it wasn't initially in 2020, but it was in around the middle of 2021. And I've seen a couple of different empirical studies done, some of which say that this is from quote unquote long COVID. Others attribute it to injuries related to vaccines. But whatever the case may be, the huge uptick in people on disability has also removed folks from the labor force, and those people are likely to never return.